O nga hung benzaguru pema sidi hung. O nga hung benzaguru pema sidi hung. O nga hung benzaguru pema sidi hung. Okay, hello, welcome. Today is Monday, May 17, 2021, here at Dharmata in the Silent Sim in Second Life. Thank you all for attending my our Dharma talk here in silence. Today we're going to be talking about the first, that is the preliminary sutra of the three sutras which are associated with the Lotus Sutra in a series of 6 talks consisting of a discussion of the Innumerable Meaning Sutra, which is the preliminary sutra to the Lotus Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra itself, which will consist of 4 talks, and then concluding with the Sutra of Contemplation of the Dharma Practice of Universal Sage Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, which will constitute this last talk of the series. I gave this series of talks a few years ago in conjunction with an actual reading of the Lotus Sutra, in which we all read the Lotus Sutra from beginning to end together as an act of merit. That did take about 9 hours. Today we're just going to be talking, or in the next, today and over the next 5 weeks, we're just going to be talking about doing the talks about the sutra. We won't be reading the Lotus Sutra as such. So if you haven't read the Lotus Sutra and its preliminary and succedent, if that's a word, sutras, you might consider doing that. It will probably enhance your understanding of the talks. They're easily available, including free versions online. The one I like, because it includes all 3 sutras together in one book, is the 3 Sutra. The editor's or translator's name is, there's several, I think this one is Kuto or Kata or something like that, but if you look up the 3 Sutra in Amazon, you will find it. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to start by reading the foreword and the preface to my book, The Treasure House of Secrets, published by Chronic Press in 2012. And then we'll conclude today with the Innumerable Meaning Sutra. And then we'll begin the Sutra proper next Monday. So, Pundarika Sutra, literally the discourse on the true law of the White Lotus. It is the basis of 4 schools of Mahayana Buddhism, Tiantai, Tendai, Chiontai, and Nichiren. Pardon my Chinese pronunciation, and is influential in Zen Buddhism as well. Many East, especially Dogen, I believe. Many East Asian Buddhists regard the Lotus Sutra as the summation of the highest teachings of Buddhism. Gogaku Fusei proposed in 1934 that the verse section of chapters 1 to 9 and 17 are the oldest, dating them to the 1st century before the Common Era, about the same time that the Pali Canon was first written down and the Prajnaparamita literature appeared. The prose section was added in the 1st century of the Common Era, and the rest in 2 stages during the 2nd century of the Common Era. Tamura thinks that chapters 2 to 9 were completed about 50 of the Common Era. Chapters 10 to 22 were added about 100 of the Common Era. Finally, chapters 23 to 28 were added about 150 of the Common Era. The Lotus Sutra was translated from Sanskrit into Chinese 3 times, in 286 of the Common Era by Dhamaraksha, in 406 of the Common Era by Kumarajiva, and a revised version of Kumarajiva's text in 601 of the Common Era by Jnanagupta and Dharmagupta. Although no longer extant, many scholars now believe that the Lotus Sutra was originally composed in a Prakrit language, similar to Pali, and then translated into Sanskrit and Chinese. It is therefore part of the Prakrit Buddhist legacy. The Lotus Sutra is traditionally associated with the Innumerable Meaning Sutra, which we'll be discussing today, regarded as a prologue, and the Samantabhadra Meditation Sutra as an epilogue. The Lotus Sutra was first translated into a European language by Eugene Burnouf and published in 1852. A chapter of the translation in progress was published in 1844 in the American transcendentalist magazine The Dial. Hendrik Kern published the first and to date only complete translation of the Sanskrit version, at least as far as I'm 1984. 7 English translations have been published to date, and Spanish and German translations also exist. According to Donald Lopez, the Lotus Sutra presents, quote, a radical revision of both the Buddhist path and of the person of the Buddha, unquote. Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Chandrakirti, Santadeva, and other authors in the Madhyamaka and Ukachara schools frequently cite the Lotus. Several commentaries on the Lotus Sutra exist, including an Indian commentary by Vasubandhu and a Chinese commentary by Dao Sheng. Zhi Yi wrote 2 commentaries on the Sutra. Dao Sheng and Zhi Yi both related the teachings of the Lotus Sutra to the doctrine of the Buddha nature, the Tathagata. Dogen also refers frequently to the Lotus Sutra and spent his last days reciting and writing from the Lotus Sutra in his hermitage, which he named Lotus Sutra Hermitage. Hakuin Ekaku, the Rinzai Zen master, is said to have been enlightened while reading the 3rd chapter of the sutra. I originally presented this commentary on the Lotus Sutra to the members of the Riverview Buddha Center, which was located in Yarmouth, Second Life, the Yarmouth Sim, as a series of 4 one-hour talks in the summer of 2017. So I'm going to read the preface to the Lotus Sutra proper, and then I'll, just to sort of orient you, even though we're not going to be talking about the Lotus Sutra itself today, and then we'll conclude with my discussion of the Innumerable Meaning Sutra. So this is the preface to the book Treasure House of Secrets. Renowned in the West as the Buddhist New Testament, the Siddharma Pundaraka Sutra is revered by all Mahayana Buddhists. It might be described with equal justification as the Buddhist Quran, in that it claims to reestablish the primordial spiritual teaching, as did Muhammad, of course, in the Quran. Thus it bears significant resemblance to the Pali Canon, which might surprise some people, because it is generally regarded as a Mahayana Sutra. Thus it bears significant many East Asians regard the Lotus Sutra as encoding the ultimate teaching of the Buddha. The book exists in Sanskrit, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Tibetan, and Vietnamese versions, as well as many translations into Western languages. I have depended largely on Leon Hurwitz's Scripture of the Lotus Blossom of the Fine Dharma, published in 1976, the Threefold Lotus Sutra, which I mentioned earlier, published in 1975, translated by Kato, Yoshiro Tamura, and Ejiro Miyasaka, and the classic Sanskrit translation of H. Kern, which was, as I mentioned earlier, published in 1884. That appeared in Max Muller's Sacred Books of the East series, volume 21, still used by scholars such as A.K. Warder. So it's still a highly reputable and significant translation, despite the passage of time. The Lotus Sutra is often bound up with the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings and the Sutra of Meditation on the Bodhisattva Universal Virtue, as it is in the Threefold Lotus Sutra, as a preface and an epilogue respectively. I have approached the Lotus Sutra as a single synthetic work, working through the chapters in their straightforward formal order without regard to any questions of chronology. I have discussed my reasons for this non-time-bound approach in my essay, Hermeneutics of the Problem of Tradition, which constitutes Chapter 1 of my book Dharma Talks, which you can also buy at chronikerpress.com. Whatever its development, the number of chapters of the final form of the Lotus Sutra, which is 28, is of course the number of the moon, 4 times 7, an important symbol of the Dharma in the Pali Canon and elsewhere. 28 is also the number of historical Buddhas listed in the Buddhavamsa, culminating in Gautama. Maitreya, the future or coming Buddha, is number 29. Like another Chinese sutra, the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, the Lotus Sutra has been credited with at least one enlightenment experience, that of Hakuin Ikaku, who lived between 1686 and 1768, who was the reviver of the Rinzai school of Japanese Zen, while reading Chapter 3. So there is a possibility, while reading the Lotus Sutra, you will be enlightened. Perhaps even listening to commentary, you will be enlightened as a result of hearing the sublime truths of the Lotus Sutra. Scholars have identified three main themes in the threefold division of the Sutra. The one vehicle of the wonderful Dharma, that is the essential oneness of all Buddhist ways, also called the Ekayana. The everlasting original Buddha, the primordial Buddha archetype or paradigm, as I have interpreted it in a non-theistic way, and the way of the wisdom being or bodhisattva, emphasizing the method or path. The Lotus Sutra and the Pali Canon. There is growing acceptance of the view that the original language of the earliest sections of the Lotus Sutra was not Sanskrit, but a Prakrit language, like Pali. Kern finds numerous vestiges of Magadhi and Pali in his translation of the Sanskrit version of the Lotus Sutra. Although clearly a Mahayana text, the Lotus Sutra is filled with references to the Pali Canon. As we know from my talk on the early Buddhist schools, which some of you may have attended, it is included in this redux of my 40 favorite talks from the last 10 years that we're doing here at Dharmata. The Mahayana grew out of the early Mahayana schools rather than as a reaction against them, as is widely but wrongly believed. The Lotus Sutra includes many references which will be familiar to readers of the Pali Canon, including places, Mount Gridrakutta, Gridriakutta, Vulture Peak, the Buddha's favorite peak in Rajagaha, people such as Mahakashapa, Sariputra, Mahagaldhyayana, Ananda, Araula, Yasodhara, etc. And I just like to correct myself. When I said, let's find the word. Oh, never mind. It was close enough. I can't find it now. Doctrines such as arahantship, nirvana, parinirvana, the four great truths, hearers, void or emptiness, perfect wisdom, self, the self-born, self-concentration, skill, mantras, tathagatas, wheel of causes and effects, that is interdependent origination, samsara, the 62 false views, and many others. Here it is. I said Gridriakutta. It's Gridrakuta. That's how it's pronounced. Sorry about that. Mount Gridrakuta. The famous Vulture's Peak, of course. And even events, for example, the enlightenment of and subsequent preaching by the Buddha, and the trope of remembering similar situations with disciples in past lives. But the Lotus Sutra represents a radical revisioning of the meaning and significance of the Buddhist project as it introduces a new understanding of the goal of attainment and the character of the path itself. While it is fashionable to say that the Lotus Sutra is rhetorical and has no real content, one can identify over 100 essential concepts throughout the Lotus Sutra, all organized around the central revelation of the Lotus Sutra, identified by A.K. Warder with the 15th chapter of the book. Academics seem to prefer to discuss things like symbolism, plot, the storyline, characterization, etc. In this discussion, we're going to be focusing very much on meaning of the Lotus Sutra. Warder is probably referring to chapter 15 of Kern's Sanskrit edition, which is chapter 16 of the Chinese edition, since chapter 12 was split in two in the 5th or 6th century. None of the content was lost, however, although there are subtle differences between the Sanskrit and the Chinese versions. Scholars remain uncertain as to which version was first. So it's possible that the original language is the Prakrit, as I said, but between Sanskrit and Chinese, it's possible that it was translated from the Prakrit into Chinese and then into Sanskrit, or vice versa. The symbol of the lotus. The Sanskrit word Pundaraka means Lotus Sutra, as well as the color white. Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, and Jains all revere the lotus. Buddhists regard it as a symbol of body, speech, and mind. Rooted in the mud of samsara, the Lotus Sutra blooms on the surface of the water, untainted by the mud from which it draws its nourishment. Clancy Gilroy just TP'd in. If you could take care of that, Yoss. It also symbolizes non-attachment, since water rolls easily off its smooth petals. Many Asian deities are depicted sitting on lotus flowers, including the famous, oh, never mind, I'm about to mention that. When the Bodhisattva first walked, lotus flowers were said to bloom from his footprints. Padmasambhava is also said to have been born sitting on a lotus flower at the age of 8. The idea of the Tathagata. Tathagata is a somewhat mysterious word that the Buddha uses throughout the Pali Canon with reference to himself, and less frequently, but sometimes, with reference to adepts or arhants, either by the Buddha or, of course, it's possible that was adopted by subsequent editors as well and applied to arhants. It is generally translated as one who has thus gone, or one who has thus come. The word is used as though it were familiar to its audience, but has not been found in any pre-Buddhist context. Another mystery similar, in fact, to the 32 marks of a great being, which is also used in the same fashion and also has not been found in pre-Buddhist writings. Even as early as Buddhaghosa, who lived in the 5th century of the Common Era, the exact meaning of the word was uncertain. In his commentary on the Digha Nikaya, Buddhaghosa gives 8 alternative definitions. One who has arrived or walked in such a way, one who knows reality, one who is one discerned or declares truth, one whose deeds accord with his words, the great doctor whose medicine cures all ills. The Anguttara Nikaya says that the Tathagata is called such because what is seen, heard, sensed, and cognized, attained, searched into, and pondered over by the mind is fully understood. In other words, the Tathagata is one who understands. Tatata refers to thusness or suchness, reality in itself. Richard Gombrich has suggested that the word means one like that. The word appears in the Mahabharata, where it says, thus, or tata, is gone, or gati, of those who have realized the truth. In the Pali Canon, the Tathagata is described as immeasurable, inscrutable, hard to fathom, and not apprehended. Similarly, the Lotus Sutra refers frequently to, quote, the mystery of the Tathagatas, unquote. The Tathagata is free of karmic tendencies or samskaras and is thus beyond the comprehension of other beings. They are, quote, deep, immeasurable, unfathomable, like the mighty ocean. Although this is sometimes taken to imply that the Tathagata has no post-mortem existence, this is strictly speaking not necessarily implied, since it does not follow that because something cannot be seen, that it does not exist. The Buddha explicitly rejects nihilism, and his use of the tetralemma is far more profound than simple negation. Edward Kuntz says that in the Mahayana view, the Tathagata refers to the true inherent selfhood of the human being. However, we must remember that this selfhood, quote-unquote, is not the inherently self-existing atomic noun self of the Upanishads, but a continuous but essentially transient consecution of sentience. It is the process philosophy of Whitehead, or the I seem to be a verb of R. Buckminster Fuller. The Lotus Sutra appears to have originated in Kashmir during the 4th Buddhist Council of the Sarvastivadin school, and in the Pali tradition, the Pali Canon was written down during the 4th Buddhist Council in the 1st century before the Common Era. The Sarvastivadin 4th Buddhist Council is believed to have been held during the reign of the Kusana Emperor Kanishka, who reigned between 78 and 102, reigned or lived, I'm not sure which, between 78 and 102 of the Common Era, confirming Tamura's chronology of the Lotus Sutra, presuming that is his reign. Interestingly, the tradition that the Lotus Sutra appeared 500 years after the Parinirvana corresponds to 423 to 399 before the Common Era for the Parinirvana, which is not far off the increasingly accepted view that the Buddha died between 410 and 370 before the Common Era. Although the Theravadins do not accept the authority of this council, the Sarvastivada was an influential Hinayana school that split off from the Sthavirada in the 3rd century before the Common Era, during the reign of King Ashoka, the same school from which the Theravada claims descent. Order notes that the Sarvastivada was the least conservative Hinayana school, and modern scholars believe that the Lotus Sutra was originally written in a Prakrit similar to Pali, and then translated into Sanskrit like the Sarvastivada canon. Although I believe I think that is the mainstream view, but I think there is a question, as I mentioned earlier, about whether it was translated to Chinese first. It is ironic that the Lotus Sutra, arguably the most influential and important Mahayana sutra, seems to have originated as the work of a Hinayana school. And that completes the introduction. We're going to go on to discuss the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings, which I'll just put in the chat. There we go. So the Innumerable Meanings Sutra was translated in 481 of the Common Era by Dharma Jatayashas. The Sanskrit title is Avanta Nudesa Sutra. Traditionally, it is regarded as a prologue to the Lotus Sutra. It is referred to in Chapter 1 of the Lotus Sutra. The title refers to the infinite diversity of phenomena, all of which arise out of formlessness, which is the true nature of reality. And we're going to begin with Chapter 1. I won't bother putting that in the chat. According to the Lotus Sutra, this is Chapter 1, of course, of the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings. According to the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha teaches the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings as a prologue to the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus says that the Bodhisattvas watch over and are instructed by the Sutra. Buddha enters into a meditation called the Station of Innumerable Meanings, quote unquote, characterized by immobility, a familiar yogic state. The Sutra of Innumerable Meanings is divided into 3 chapters on the virtues, preaching, and the 10 merits, which are virtuous conduct, dharma preaching, and the 10 blessings in Jean Reeves' translation. The Sutra of Innumerable Meanings begins with the Buddha on Vulture Peak, accompanied by an assembly of 12,000 monastics, 80,000 bodhisattvas, all of whom have obtained the Dharma body, that is arhatship and nirvana, who know all the Dharma ways and understand the secret of the nature of reality, and a large number of human and non-human beings, including male and female Buddhist monastics and householders, kings, princes, and people in all stations of life. Desire being dampened, the gateway to nirvana is opened by mindfulness of the breathing, the Tathagata's dwelling, the cooling of the passions. The realization of interdependent origination and emptiness ameliorate suffering. The Bodhisattva, called Great Adornment, approaches the Buddha, worships him, and praises him in verse for his trans-dual illumination and dispassion, detached even from thinking, and thus, having attained that which is beyond thinking, marked with all the signs of greatness. He declares that all living beings are spiritual. The Buddha reveals himself to the assembly as a trans-dual body of light that is at the same time not a body, with symbolic features, the marks of a superior being that are not features of a physical body. These are, of course, the 32 marks of a superior being. Next, Chapter 2. Great Adornment then asks the Buddha about the Dharma of the Tathagata. The Buddha reveals that soon he will enter parinirvana and that he will answer any questions. Everyone in the assembly asks the Buddha which doctrine facilitates the quick attainment of perfect enlightenment. The Buddha declares that the doctrine of innumerable meanings facilitates the quick attainment of perfect enlightenment. He declares this doctrine as follows, quote, all dharmas were originally, will be, and are in themselves void in nature and form. They are neither great nor small, neither appearing nor disappearing, neither fixed nor immovable, and neither advancing nor retreating, and they are non-dual. just emptiness. Unquote. The question that Great Adornment asks, and the Buddhist answer definitely confirms, that wisdom is the salvific principle. The question that a Great Adornment asks, and the Buddha's answer definitely confirms, that wisdom is the salvific principle, everything else being skilled, means, upaya. Thus, by perfect understanding, one attains perfect enlightenment. The beginning and end of the path are paradoxically the same. Moreover, not all doctrines are equal. Some doctrines are truer and more powerful and effective at facilitating the attainment of perfect enlightenment, which is, of course, the doctrine of the power of truth. According to the Innumerable Meanings Sutra and the Lotus Sutra, the doctrine just articulated is therefore the supreme and essential Buddhist teaching, consisting of the realization that every phenomenon and every moment is essentially empty in nature and form and non-dual or trans-dual, comprehending all contradictions within themselves and therefore inherently binary and non-binary, dual and transdual at the same time. Now it just so happens that this profoundly esoteric doctrine has become the central discovery of quantum physics, almost 2,400 years after the Buddha's enlightenment. The Buddha goes on to instruct Great Adornment that because of discrimination and self-seeking, suffering arises and human beings experience endless transmigration through the cycles of existence. Buddha advises bodhisattvas to cultivate compassion for all living beings and to observe the arising, or upada, development, or titi, and the cessation, or bhanga, all changing phenomena, realizing that some phenomena produce good results and other phenomena produce bad results because of their nature, leading to pleasure and displeasure, happiness and suffering. The bodhisattva should next observe that this fourfold process characterizes every moment and instant. Nothing is essential. Everything arises out of emptiness, cycles within cycles, processes within processes, with no matter, no essential substance at all. All is essential emptiness. The innumerable meanings originate from one law. This one law is, namely, formlessness. Being formless, it is called the real aspect of things. This theory of momentariness, or kanika vado, or universal flux, produces a paradox, because every moment, being infinitesimal, must exist and not exist simultaneously. To be extended in space or time is to be substantive and thus illusory and transient. This paradox re-emerged in the 20th century in the split-screen experiment of quantum physics, like Schrödinger's cat, which is both alive and dead at the same time. So before it goes through the double split, the photon is neither a wave nor a particle. This tells us very clearly that the universe is not material in any ordinary sense. Through this realization, living beings are disabused of their illusory desire for things, which is impossible, since everything is in flux. No desire can be satisfied, and attain the central point of realizing their true nature. Bodhisattvas aid suffering beings, which in turn results in happiness and perfect enlightenment for themselves and others. Great Adornment is perplexed, complains that the Buddha's doctrine is incomprehensible, though he does not doubt it, and yet he seems to be uncertain at the same time, and asks him to explain the relationship between all of the previous doctrines taught by the Buddha and this singular new doctrine that he now says alone leads to perfect enlightenment. He declares that this is the highest Dharma, which leads to the realization of the 10th stage of the Bodhisattva path. On that note, I'm just going to have a bit of water. In reply, the Buddha declares that all of the bodhisattvas will attain perfect Buddhahood. He explains that hitherto, as a result of sitting under the Bodhi tree for 6 years, he's taught different beings according to their different natures, faculties, and attainments, and what they needed to do at that time, and compares the doctrine of cleansing water that appears in many different forms, such as streams, rivers, wells, ponds, creeks, ditches, and seas, yet they all have the same essential cleansing quality. again echoing Lao Tzu. All through his teaching, however, the Buddha declares that the essential truth that all dharmas are naturally, quote, are naturally vacant, ceaselessly transformed, and instantly born and destroyed, unquote. That is, the doctrines of non-self-identity, change, and the chain of causation. This is the purifying water. Although it is a single teaching, according to the differences between beings, it is perceived and understood by them differently, and thus beings attain to different degrees of realization, develop different schools of thought and practice, all based on their personal preferences, predilections, and prejudices. Thus, Buddhas appear differently to different beings in different places and at different times. Similarly, early, middle, and late teachings do not have the same meaning. Only Buddhas and 10th stage bodhisattvas can understand the ultimately true doctrine. Bodhisattvas who grasp this doctrine fully transcend mortality. 32,000 bodhisattvas attained the meditation called innumerable meanings. Innumerable meanings itself is a meditative realization, as indicated at the beginning of the sutra, and thus a meditation of the vipassana or insight type. Clearly, the induction of such a meditative realization is the purpose of the sutra. Chapter 3. Great Adornment declares that the Sutra of Innumerable Meanings is 3 times profound. Those who hear the sutra will obtain the divine powers, the 4 ignoble truths, the chain of causation or emptiness, the 6 perfections, 4 degrees of attainment culminating in arhatship, and the division to enlightenment, and the aspiration to enlightenment, which is probably refers to the bodhicitta, whereas those who do not hear it will never achieve Buddhahood. Great Adornment asks the Buddha to explain the sutra, which is inconceivable and profound. Referring to the great direct way, quote-unquote, the Buddha says that the sutra enables people to attain Buddhahood quickly and without pain. He's remembering, of course, from our discussion of the Pali Canon, that the Buddha underwent 6 years of self-mortification, after which he rejected the path of asceticism entirely. He states that the Sutta comes from the place where the Buddhas are and enables people to attain Buddhahood by awakening bodhicitta, love, ecstasy, dispassion, generosity, obedience, perseverance, assiduity, meditation, wisdom, salvation, the 10 virtues, non-existence, non-retrogression, and non-defilement. Thus, cultivation of bodhicitta is the first inconceivable merit power, or amazing power of blessing, quote-unquote, in Ries's translation, of the sutra. Perfectly understanding the doctrine of innumerable meanings is the second meritorious power of the sutra. This doctrine has 2 aspects. First, it refers to the interior meaning of the teachings of the Buddha. Second, it refers to the self-propagation of the Dharma, whereby meanings, or means, multiply themselves dynamically and thus create and perpetuate a continuous Dharma development throughout history, as we are experiencing even now. Achieving superlative compassion is the third meritorious power. Achieving superlative cognition of the meaning of the Dharma is the 4th meritorious power. The Buddha compares himself to a king, the sutra to a queen, and the bodhisattva to their son, alluding to a formula called in Kabbalah the Tetragrammaton, consisting of the Hebrew letters Yod He Wah, referring to, quote, the secret law of the Buddhas, quote unquote, each of whom rediscovers the Dharma in, for, and by himself. Thus, Dharma propagates itself through the lineage of the Buddhas. The 5th meritorious power of the sutra is to enable those who keep, read, recite, and copy the sutra to realize the bodhisattva way, even though they still have faults and delusions, again echoing something in the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, and convert living beings through their personal charisma. The 6th meritorious power is that they will deliver beings from their delusions, making them overcome all suffering, and attain the law, the merit, and the way, equal to a Tathagata, by communicating the Dharma to them. The attainment of the rare or extraordinary mind and the six perfections is the seventh meritorious power. They attain confidence in the certainty of immortality while still alive. Mortality and delusion are destroyed naturally, and they attain the seventh stage of a bodhisattva. This is the third reference in the sutra to the stages of the bodhisattva path or way. Here, the seventh inconceivable meritorious power or amazing blessing is identified with the seventh stage of a bodhisattva. The identity of the number, as well as the previous references, including the first stage of immobility, suggests that the 10 merit powers or blessings correspond to the 10 stages of a bodhisattva. And below, I have tabulated the common names of the stages and the merit powers or blessings to which they correspond in numerical order. Correspondences are significant and correspond to the conventional descriptions of the stages. And I would like to share this with you in the chat, but I can't do it from the book. So I'm going to have to go very quickly to the website, and I'll pick it up. From there, if you can just hold on for a moment, I will do that, and I apologize to Mr. Inglewood, but maybe you can edit out this bit while I do that, but it shouldn't take me more than a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to put this in the chat so you can follow along, and I will read it as well. Oh, it turned out pretty well. So these are the 10 stages of the Bodhisattva way and the merit powers or amazing blessings. So divide into 3 columns. Number on the left, the number of the Bodhisattva stage, then in the middle, the name of the Bodhisattva stage, and then in the right hand, an interpretation of that corresponding to the merit power or amazing blessing. And it's divided into 2 groups. The first 6 called reversible and the last 4 called irreversible. It simply means that in the first 6 stages of a bodhisattva can fall back into non-bodhisattvahood. But these last 4 stages, once you have reached the 7th stage, you cannot go back. You advance too far, and those stages are irreversible. So 1 is very joyous, corresponding to the bodhicitta. 2 is called the stainless, corresponding to innumerable meanings. 3 is the light maker, corresponding to metta. 4 is, or metta. 4 is radiant intellect, corresponding to secret dharma. 5 is difficult to master, corresponding to enthusiasmos, or enthusiasm, derived from the Greek concept of enthusiasm, which is a spiritual experience, familiar to the Dionysiacs, for example. 6, the manifest, which corresponds to the power of truth, which we've discussed in many of these talks. Then the 4 irreversible stages are 7, gone afar, corresponding to bodhi. 8, the immovable, corresponding to the arhat, or nirvana, and that corresponds to the dharmakaya. 9 is good intelligence, corresponding to ecstasis or ecstasy. And 10, the highest stage, the cloud of dharma, corresponding to dharani, and that would constitute a Buddha. The 8th meritorious power is the power of devotion to the sutra as in the body of the Buddha, the dharmakaya. The 9th meritorious power is the joyful leap into the unknown, or rebirth. 10th meritorious power corresponds to the 10th stage of the Bodhisattva way, called the Dharma cloud, characterized by the bodily realization of the divine power. The 10 stages are further divided into irreversible and irreversible modes. The Bodhisattva can fall back from the first 6 stages into a lower degree of spiritual cultivation. However, once one reaches the 7th degree, the ultimate attainment of Buddhahood is certain. In addition, the attainment of the 8th stage Bodhisattva is technically equivalent to the attainment of arhatship and nirvana, except that the Bodhisattva is reborn. That is an essential difference, of course. Great Adornment vows on behalf of himself and the assembly that they will propagate the Dharma, and that by their power of truth, the Dharma will be propagated throughout infinite worlds. This alludes, of course, to the doctrine of the transfer of merit. In conclusion, one can see that the Innumerable Meaning Sutra is less a reaction against the Pali Suttas then a deeper exegesis of the Pali recension, including references to the same essential doctrines, including the Dharma body, the precepts, concentration or meditation, the salvific power of wisdom, liberation, insight into liberation, the dust of desire, nirvana, the 12-fold chain of causation or interdependent origination, suffering, the non-dual, although Bhikkhu Bodhi denies that the concept of the non-dual is found in the Pali Canon. I disagree with that. The body, the 32 characteristics, and the 80 features of a great man. That's the 32 major features, and then the rest minor. The mental body, mantras, dharanis, emptiness, tranquility, samsara, the 6 classes of transmigration, metta, the 3 characteristics, the 4 modes, the theory of momentariness, dharma nature, the 4 fruits, the 3 paths, 84,000 teachings, skilled means, indifference, the continuity of the Buddha Vachana, power of truth, 4 noble truths, 6 perfections, the Tathagata, the Tathagata's dwelling, Parinirvana, and more. And thus ends, just in time, my voice is wearing out. Thus, I've been talking for 6 hours today. Thus ends the Innumerable Meaning Sutra. So that concludes my commentary on the Innumerable Meaning Sutra, which, as I said, is the prelude to Lotus Sutra, which we'll be discussing over the next 4 weeks, where we conclude with the dedication of merit, whereby we dedicate the merit of this talk to all beings. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or discussion? And I'll just remind you, if you are interested, you can buy this book. It's available at www.chronicapress.com, paperback and cloth. Any comments, questions, or discussion before we conclude with the dedication of merit?
I would like to comment, if possible, in voice.
Go ahead.
I've been reading this Innumerable Meaning Sutra as you suggested, and I pasted the link from what I read in chat, so you guys can look at it if you like. And you asked to share how we appreciated it, and I would really like to do that. And I would like to say a few things which I really appreciated in it. It is a hard thing to understand, is non-dualism, but what made it easy somehow to understand was the notion of self, of which was spoken, and in the text there were links to the explanations, and then the notions of self which were rejected were spelled out, and they all reflected as a self which was opposed to something else, which was interesting because that only left a non-dual self. That was interesting, I thought. The next thing which helped me in the Innumerable Meaning Sutra was the note to the word being on the way. If one is on the way, one needs to realize all things, all forms we see as being inside ourselves. I found that a very expressive point of view towards the non-dualism. And then I really liked this sentence, which I will paste in chat so you can read it with me. And I want to say that the word dharma also means thing. So the immeasurable meanings are born from one dharma, from one thing. So it's always one. This one dharma is no appearance, which is not apart from appearance. The truth that appearance and no appearance are not apart from each other is called true reality. There again is that non-dualism to which we can strive by realizing that all we see is in fact inside our consciousness. That's what I wanted to say as appreciation for reading this sutra.
Thank you. Another thing that we can realize, not necessarily in this sutra, but it's in the Mahayana, is realizing all beings as Buddhas, essentially. That's a practice as well, which is of course related to metta, which is also used as a practice leading to enlightened realization. Any other comments, questions, or discussion before we conclude with the dedication of merit? It's 3 minutes to the hour, so that worked out pretty well. While I wait, I'll just pull up the dedication of merit in case anyone else has anything to say. So next Monday at 1 o'clock, Second Lifetime, we'll be talking about the beginning of the Lotus Sutra. I'll probably just fill the hour with each, and it will work out to approximately 4 talks though. Okay, go ahead, plug your talk for tomorrow. Okay, beautiful, worked out perfectly. 1 minute to the hour. So please feel free to join me in the dedication of merit, whereby we dedicate the merit of this talk to all beings. Whatever understanding, whatever positive force has come from this, may it go deeper and deeper and act as a cause to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all. As always, thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss Dharma. It is my pleasure and privilege. Until next week, Namaskar.